Hello, my name is Amanda, and this is the 8th episode of my podcast, Amanda Makes. You can find all of the show notes on my blog if you found me through YouTube, or you can connect and subscribe on YouTube and hit the like button if you found me on my blog. Make sure to check both places if you don't mind. Thanks for following along. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you'll grab a cup of tea and sit down for a little visit. This podcast is a time that I like to share what I am making, and these days most of what I'm making is woolen wearables, nitty crafts. But today I'm going to delve into a little more about what I have been stitching and quilting, or what I hope to be stitching and quilting in the coming weeks. And just wanted to catch you up on some of the projects that have been getting done little bit by little bit while I have been out of podcasting since my bathroom remodel has been going on. If you follow me on Instagram, you will know that I've had so many irons in the fire, and it's been very crazy this past month. But life is starting to calm down, and I'm finding my new normal, and it's starting to look a little springy out there. So I'm just really excited about the coming weeks and trying to get myself back into a good routine, trying to get myself back motivated to get the house put back together, finish up those little bits and bobs of things that are nagging me about, you know, being a new person in an old house, and have a little bit of fun while I'm doing it. So definitely connect with me on Ravelry, Instagram, YouTube, and the blog. And as it stands right now, I've got different usernames for each of those accounts, which I want to change, but I am having a little bit of a social media identity crisis, and so I need to have a little bit more time to sort out what direction I'm going to take the blog in from here, what direction I'm going to take, you know, the Instagram account and those sorts of things. It's always so interesting because I find this gravitational pull, I guess as a PR person. You probably don't know this about me. I am educated in public relations with an emphasis on campaigns, and so it is ingrained in me to build a brand with everything, to build a brand, to get a message, to tell the story and sell the story. You have a story that you need to get out there, and then you figure out how to get it out there to the right audience in the way that is most profitable or beneficial to you or your organization. And so social media really blows my mind. I guess I've been on Facebook for about 11 years, and it was at the very beginning, right when I was coming out of college, and I thought, this is really ridiculous. This thing only works, you know, things like, well, any social media only will work if you have your critical mass of participants. And at the time, I didn't know anyone on Facebook, and my friend was just saying, you got to get on Facebook, you got to get on Facebook, it's going to be huge. And so you know how that story ended. The same was true with Pinterest. I've been on Pinterest for about 6 years, and I had this sweet friend, and she came to me and she said, this thing was made for you. It's called Pinterest. It's like pin and interest. You've got to look it up. And so, I mean, that was back when Pinterest accounts were invitation only, and I had to wait 6 weeks to get my Pinterest account. So it was just really crazy. But long story short, I am struggling with the fact that it's possible for people now to have their private life being a public brand. And what does that mean when I share my things on Instagram, which my family really connects with and stays in tune with? How do I want to communicate my personal life to the greater public? And do I want to communicate my personal life to the greater public? And these are questions that we all think about, but maybe I think about them a little more complexly, a little more, whatever, the word is that I should be using right there, but maybe I think about it too much and let it worry me too much. But anyhow, moving onward, I'm going to be changing some things up. So stay tuned and don't be weirded out by it when you see it coming. Going to talk real quick about some podcasts that I've really enjoyed lately. I'm having a hard time getting on board. I have this weird thing, and I do it with blogs, I do it with podcasts, I do it with everything, where I only am in love with something until it becomes mainstream, and then I think, well, you don't need me. You know, I was telling everybody about you when I loved you and nobody knew you, and now that you're huge and you're in all the magazines and you've got a line of dishes at the Walmart, I don't really care to follow anymore. It's just too mass-produced, too mainstream. It's like the difference between going to a concert in a pub or a park and hearing live music and buying a record. And I'd so much rather hear live music with 18 other people than buy the same record that's played and played and played until it melts on the radio. So anyhow, I've tried a lot of knitting podcasts, and I throw them to the wall and see if they stick, and not a lot are sticking, but I have found Evie at The Charm of It. Her blog is called The Charm of It, and I really like that I relate to her. She has some autoimmune complications. She has arthritis that I know of. I don't know the extent of her chronic illness, but I know that she lives with chronic illness, and that is something that is relevant to me because my sister has lupus, and my sister-in-law and mother-in-law both have many chronic autoimmune issues, and so I can appreciate that aspect of her life and relate to that as well. And I just love her taste in yarn and knitting, and it's a good visit to watch her podcast. And then also I'm still enjoying Tilly Trout, who is in Norfolk, I believe, and she has been podcasting for a couple of years. She has a group on Facebook, which I don't really participate in. Not Facebook, Ravelry, which I don't really participate in. And I only have 2 more to catch up on all of her podcasts, and I've just really enjoyed those. So she's just a happy, happy person, and I love to listen to her talk about her knitting. So anyhow, Evie and Tilly are my two most recent podcast discoveries, and then of course I'm also keeping up with Kate Willful Mina at the Blue Stocking podcast as well. So moving on, I am doing a little different format just because it's what helps me edit my videos and upload them. The discussion won't be any different, but I am going to attempt to stick to 15-minute blips, because my software uploads things much better if they haven't crossed the 15-minute threshold. So then I'll just splice them from there to give you the normal podcast. So anyhow, without much further ado, let's get into what I am making. Okay, so first things first, I wanted to discuss my finished projects. I have a couple, excuse the reach. I shared throughout the holiday season how I wanted to do a shawl for my friend's baby Evie, who will be 2, I believe 2, this April. She is enamored of her mother's woolen wear, so she likes to be wrapped up in a scarf. She likes to be wrapped up in a cowl, but she's just so tiny that she doesn't really have anything that's her own size. So at I guess it was Thanksgiving, I decided I was going to do this. I was going to mail it to her for Christmas. It was going to be excellent, and it totally didn't happen because of all of the other Christmas knitting that I had to get done. But anyhow, I found this yarn, and it was in my stash, and it turned out to be absolutely perfect for the task. You can see those colors are really incredible. I used the Emerald City Shawlette pattern, and I downsized the needles to a number 8, and instead of using 2 strands of worsted, I just used 1 strand of worsted weight yarn. The yarn is Lion Brand Amazing, and it's in the Mauna Loa colorway. And the reason I have not gifted this yet is because I'm struggling to figure out how to block it. These little eyelet bits are supposed to be pointy, blocked pointy at the end, and the Lion Brand wool is the Lion Brand Amazing yarn is 50% wool and 50% acrylic. So I made my mother-in-law, let me grab the scissors because this is getting to me, made my mother-in-law a shawl at Christmas using the same yarn in a different colorway, and it did not block well. I blocked it like I would wool. And I pulled out each of the points, and then it just sproinged right back, and didn't hold its shape at all. So then I had Fox's sweater, which was the little baby sweater that I did right at the turn of the new year, and it was a large, what was it? I can't remember. It was woolies. It was, I think, 80% wool and 20% acrylic. And I blocked it the normal way, except just around the bottom hem, I killed it with my steam iron. So I have avoided blocking this because I'm not quite sure how to kill the edge with the steam iron and get the point without melting a pin or gouging my iron or something like that. So if you have any advice on how to block acrylic or steam or kill or whatever choice of words you use, let me know, because I'd really love to get this done and sent to Texas, because it's bluebonnet season and that's beautiful, and that makes me think of bluebonnets, and she's gonna love it. So, and it's still a little chilly. I don't want to be sending it down there. Here's your shawl when it's 97 degrees out. So that's one finished project off the needles that I could use your advice on. The only other project that I have off my needles has a very long story to it. Julian and I dated, well, we met each other. Y'all are going to think I'm crazy, just bear with me. We met each other in high school. We didn't date in high school. He was 4 years older than me, so I was a freshman, he was a senior, and that's a big no-no when you're 13 and 18, respectively. So we knew each other for a great many years. We reconnected when he was finishing up his master's degree at UVA and I was finishing up my undergrad at Tennessee. And we quasi-dated long distance through email, that sort of thing, but it blew up and didn't go where we thought it might. Then a year and a half later, we ended up living in the same town. And basically, we found out in spring of 2006, we realized we were both in the same town after a year and a half of not speaking. Christmas of 2006, we decided, let's get married. And then summer of 2007, we married. So we had really only been reconnected for 6 months, 7 months when we decided, yeah, it's time to get married. He never really proposed. And instead, he gave me, I don't know if you're familiar with Sandra Boynton's books, and it's right there, I can see it, but I'm not going to get up to get it. Sandra Boynton has these books and Personal Penguin is one of them. He gave me a personal penguin, and he's got a little Bear Hugs t-shirt on. Isn't that sweet? We got that at Build-A-Bear. But he gave me a personal penguin and the Personal Penguin book, and that was pretty much, if you're not familiar with the book, it just goes through, it's a hippopotamus and a penguin, and the penguin is pleading with the hippopotamus, let me be your personal penguin, let me hold you, let me turn the flashlight on for you, let me eat dinner with you, let me do these things with you, basically let me spend all my days with you. And so with the book and the penguin, that basically became our sort of marriage mascot, if you will. And we took him on our honeymoon, and we have all these pictures of our early life with Penguin, and people give us penguins now, penguin collections, penguin ornaments, penguin things, I have a penguin tablecloth that someone gave me. So anyhow, we started hauling him around everywhere we went, and you can see he has had 8 years of wear and tear. His little knees, we joke that he needs a knee replacement. So we started wrapping him up in an old knitted cotton dish rag that my mother-in-law made a long time ago. We have all of these dish rags around the house, and so I just grabbed one that was very colorful and started wrapping him up, and he had a blankie so he would get a little less wear and tear when we were adventuring. And then the blankie got so much wear and tear that it was not functional. You can see I crocheted, when the blankie started falling apart, I crocheted an edge, and then the crocheted edge started falling apart. And I guess it's funny. We adventure. We do. We go lots of places. We go fun places, and we're out and about most all the time. But anyhow, Penguin never wanted to stay at home, and so Blanky never wanted to stay at home, and then Blanky wore himself out. Long story made longer. When I was at my mother-in-law's a couple of weekends ago, I didn't take any knitting. I just took a book, I suppose. And then it's rude when you're in the company of your family and you're having a visit to just sit there and read the whole time. At least I feel like it's rude. And so I'm thinking, why didn't I bring my knitting? I really wish I had a project in my hands. So I dug through my mother-in-law's knitting, and lo and behold, found the 10-year-old cotton that old Blanky is made from. And if you can imagine the difference between old Blanky and new Blanky, isn't that insane? The color fade. So Penguin has a new Blanky, and that is one of my very few. It's so stretchy, which is awesome. That's one of my, I guess the only other of my finished projects. It was the first time I'd ever knit a dish rag, and I have dish rags that my sister-in-law knit for me that I use very often as trivets or hot pads, or just if I need something between me and a hot thing, or need something between the counter and a hot thing. I use those, although I don't really care for them as dishcloths, as actual dishcloths. But I use them all the time, and so I'd say, oh, knit me one, knit me two, knit me more, because they're very useful to me. And then I knit this thing for myself, and I have never done anything that was so mind-numbingly boring as this thing. I mean, you get to the middle of it, and you think, aha, time to decrease. And from there, you've got half of it left to go, and it's all the same. You know how the story ends. So I powered through that, so Penguin had a new Blanky, but I'm not anxious to knit anything. I wrap him up in this papoose. And it's about time for him to retire. But he's in his papoose and safe from the dangers of the world. So anyhow, that's my finished project, and that's the extent of it, that and the Evie shawl. Okay, moving onward. Okay, we talked a little bit about these mittens when I went through my yarn purchases. I purchased some Lopi and some Cascade 220. Wrong bag. Lopi in a worsted weight, and some Cascade 220 in a green heather, because my friend from Bird Club found out that I knit, and he said, "You knit? I want mittens." So he is a geologist, and he goes all over the state inspecting, not mines. He's not the mine inspector, but he looks at mineral deposits and geological resources and says to the state, yes, this is worth something, no, this isn't, and so on and so forth. So he spends a lot of time out in the cold. He was our fearless leader when Julian and I went on the bird count on the 3rd of January. We went and we spent from sunup to sundown counting birds for the Christmas bird count. And he was our fearless leader. He's done it for 25 years in a row, and he knew where everything was. But it was funny because everybody joked when we were assigned to his group. They said, you know, okay, you've got a 7-mile radius that you need to. Okay, so let me take you back. The Christmas bird count counts birds every year during the same span of time every year, and it's a 15-mile radius. 15-mile diameter from one local point. So in order to cover all of the birds in a 15-mile diameter, you split them into quadrants, split the space into 4 quadrants, and then you divvy people up on teams, and they go out and they have a 7.5-mile radius. Quadrant of the corner of the area. So that's a lot of ground to cover from sunup to sundown and try to find all the birds that are in it. So our guy had been doing the same quadrant for 25 years, and he knows every landowner, knows every, nook and cranny. And when we were assigned to his team, the president of the bird club say, okay, everybody, zero out your odometer, because you drive for most of the day. And for people who are working with David, zero out your pedometer, because you're going to have a big day. And, see you at sundown. And he traipsed us through frozen swamp, through cattail marshes, through turnip fields, through hunting preserves, through ditches, over valleys, by lakes. We saw it that day. And so he says, I want a pair of mittens. So I'm going to do my best to do well by him, to get him a pair of yummy woolen mittens. I found a pattern for heavy men's mittens, and I am holding the 2 yarns double. The pattern is an old vintage pattern that someone transcribed and put on Ravelry. I'm not 100% satisfied with it because I originally did it up to the thumb, finished the thumb, and got to this part of the hand, I guess where your knuckles go. And it barely fit me, much less a man whose hands are much bigger than my own. So I wasn't so sure about the men's mittens. It's a great mitten pattern, just not, I don't know if my gauge is off. I don't know if my yarn is off, but they were much smaller. So I've gone back and reknit them, adding 4 stitches, I believe. I believe I was supposed to cast on 32 in the original pattern, and I'm working on a pattern of 36. It's basic. It's got a rib cuff down here, a thumb that I did, and then reconnected here, and now I'm coming up here. It's worked flat, actually, which is new for me in the mitten world. And then it'll be seamed up. So I'm right at the point where it's time for me to start my decreases. The thumb is a little big, and there's nothing worse than a floppy thumb on a mitten or a glove, which gets me. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to finish them, and Julian's hands are pretty much the same as David's hands. So I think what I might do, and you know, please stop me if this is a horrible mistake, I think what I might do is get both of the mittens finished, which has to be done by Bird Club on Thursday night. And give them a little gentle felting to come down to fit Julian's hands more precisely. Gentle felting, not a lot, and certainly not on the ribbed cuff. But I think it will make them more windproof. It'll fill in some of the gaps that are there. You can't really see the gaps, I don't think. I'm looking with the light from the kitchen window coming through. So yeah, I'm almost finished with the first one, and if I could just get some dedicated time to sit down and work on them, it would be a breeze. I've got my little, sweet little birdhouse stitch marker from Wilhelmina on there, which I really adore. So anyhow, that is a fun working project. Julian actually said, after I got started on these, he said, I want you to knit me some mittens. So as soon as I'm done with that, I'm going to cast on in the lighter color Lopi for a pair of mittens for Julian. I think he wants them to be thrummed, and that is something that I've never done before, but at least with the fact that it's getting a little warmer. If it's an epic failure, then I have all the way until next fall to figure it out. But I don't think so. I think if I can get my first pair of mittens under my belt, I'll be doing all right. Second thing on the needles is my sock. I was really enjoying this sock, and it was coming right along until, well, I was working on it during construction and everything was fine. Then I started the mittens, and I felt like the mittens were more urgent to get done. Were a more urgent project to get done because I knew that I only had a month until I saw David again. So I put the sock aside, even though it's coming along swimmingly. It's the Oz Knitter is the pattern writer and a pattern author, and the sock is called Tracks, and it's got this yummy squidgy rib down the front of it. I'm doing an Eye of Partridge heel, which is probably not the easiest way to start, not the easiest thing you could do on your first ever pair of socks, but I'm getting by. So let me tell you the true story on why this sock has stalled. Even though I wanted to get it finished during the month of February so then I could do a sock along for the month of March. I was working on it during the construction, and I took one of my itty bitty needles and I put it right in the top here of my laptop screen, just as a holding place, you know, like a little pencil groove at the top of your desk. Then that was my working needle. Then my countertop guy came, and he said, I've got an invoice for you, but I don't have a copy of it. Would you mind signing it? And then, do you have a copying machine? I said, sure. Yeah, I've got a copy function on my printer. I can handle this. So I went in and tried to copy it on the copying machine, and it would only come out yellow. Even though the thing says to me right there, low color ink, lots of black ink. And I go to make a black copy, and it will only come out yellow. It was very frustrating. So then I say to myself, mind you, the printer is in the one room of the house, the spare room, where we have all the contents of 2 bathrooms and 3 closets, and we've been living out of it like gypsies for a month. So I'm in there, and the laundry is piled on the printer, and there's nowhere for me to set the laptop down. When I decide, since I can't make a copy of it for myself, I'll just scan it and then give the original back to him. So I tote my laptop in there. I'm hooking up the printer, all of this stuff. I've got 9 workmen in here. This was the one time that everyone who was working on my house showed up at the same time. So I have a drywall man, a plumber's apprentice, a tile guy, 2 tile guy helpers, a cabinet man, and a granite man. 8 workmen and me. And my printer won't work. So I'm in there and I feel this thing jab into my toe. This is, you know, you're in a house where you've got shards of tile all over the place, you've got drywall dust all over the place, you've got pieces of stone, pieces of glass everywhere. I feel this thing jab into my toe, and I think, ugh, I need to put some shoes on. I can't tolerate being in this construction zone. I look down in my carpet, in my study, my spare room, and I see a twig, what I think is a twig. And I say, how on earth did a twig get in my house? These men are tracking in everything. And I kick it aside. Get out of my way, little twiggy bit that just stabbed my toe. And when I kick it, it goes into the fiber of the carpet and it snaps in half. And it was my working needle that had been sitting on the top of my laptop that had fallen off onto the floor when I went back there and was mistaken for a twig in the dark, unlit room with the printer that wasn't working. So, I know that I have others. These are, how big are these? These are 2.25. I know that I have others. They're in the great abyss of the basket of crafts, and I haven't dug them out yet. And I'm not going to worry about it until I've got the mitten done, but that's my sock, and that's where I stand on my sock. The end. Other project, last but not least, this is the last thing that is on my needles, and I'm not going to go into what it is, just in case it's an epic failure. But I've had this little idea, and it has caused me to go get the yard sale granny aluminum needles in a size 11, and some Lion brand Hometown USA 100% acrylic from the Walmart. I think it was $2.50 a ball, and cast on this project that might end up being a failure. It's a very easy project to knit, and it's going to fly. It's just that it's really stressful on my hands. The yarn is slippery, the needles are slippery, and holding all of it creates a lot more fatigue than I'm accustomed to with the knitting. So anyhow, stay tuned. Follow me on Instagram and you might see what this becomes, or you might see if it gets frothed. Okay, so now we talk about yarn acquisitions. I know that last week I devoted my entire podcast to the recent yarn purchases that I had made, but I forgot one thing, and I have 2 other things to share with you. I completely forgot. I kept sitting there thinking, how on earth did I spend so much money and just end up with, I guess it was, well, it was a good amount of yarn that I shared on my last podcast, but I still kept feeling like I was missing something, and I was very glad when I realized what it was. I guess at the end of last summer, beginning of the fall, I got onto the Dottie Angel frock bandwagon. So I purchased the pattern, and I had the fabric that I already had in stash. And I can't believe I don't have the fabric with me, but I'll post a picture of it with the yarn on the blog. I had some fabric that I had fallen in love with but didn't really have a purpose for it. It was on the clearance rack. It was discontinued, and so I just bought whatever was on the bolt, and I think I have 3.5 yards of it, which is perfect for the dress. But I never got around to cutting the dress because I'm sort of intimidated by the make your own binding. Or, well, I take that back. You don't have to make your own binding, but I have not been able to purchase the binding in the right measurement, the right dimension. So I just decided I was going to make my own contrast binding, and so I make binding all the time with quilting. I just never have made a bias binding that was so small. I think the dress pattern requires 1/4 of an inch of 1/4 of an inch binding. So anyhow, never made the dress. Then I've been lusting after the short row sweater on the Pearl Soho site. One of their free patterns is the short row sweater. It's longer in the front and shorter in the back, and then it comes up to a V with a little bit of an overlap, cross body overlap on the back shoulders. It is sleeveless too. And I love the sweater so much that I took the Craftsy free mini class on short rows, which was actually really helpful, and shows a couple different ways to execute your short rows to get different looking results. And I love the sweater, but it was in sport weight. Needs 600 yards of sport weight, and so my local yarn shop doesn't carry sport weight. They only have bulky worsted and sock or fingering, and so I just haven't come upon any sport weight yarn. And really, coming up with sport weight yarn in the grand scheme of everything is not been my biggest priority. But when I was buying the yarn for my sister's shawl and my shawl, the Dreambird shawls that I talked about in the last podcast, I needed something to get me up, bump me up over the free shipping threshold. So I bought myself some Knit Picks Galileo in the colorway Gem. It's a bluey, greeny, like dark aquamarine color. It is 131 yards. It's 50-gram ball. 50-gram ball, and it's 50% merino and 50% bamboo. I got 5 of them, and the reason I have tucked it away is because it was really sort of a splurge. So I'm going to, well, I guess the reason I forgot it last time is because I tucked it away, because it was a splurge, because I'm going to save it for this summer. And when Julian says, hey honey, what do you want for your anniversary? Even though we normally get house things, normally I get things that are, he never gets anything for his anniversary, but so normally we get one communal house gift, like a new waffle iron or a new grill or something like that. I think I'm going to cast this on during the summer to go with my Dottie Angel frock, which I know I will have made by then. Right. So that is yarn acquisition that we haven't discussed, number 1. Yarn acquisition that we haven't discussed, number 2, is some of this yummy Croy sock in the colorway gray brown marl. I've had one ball of this, one skein of this for years, and bought it on the clearance rack at a big box store. I think I paid $2, maybe $2.50 for it. Loved it. It's got wonderful colors, and earlier I was thinking about it and I was like, how do you describe those colors? It's really, you can describe it in birds. There are pigeons, doves, house finches, male and female. in this ball of yarn. But I didn't know at the time that it takes 2 50-gram balls, that one 50-gram ball of sock yarn will only get you 1 sock. They're lying to me that it should be Croy sock with 1 foot on there. So anyhow, Kate, aka Wolfamina, is doing a worsted weight wool hexie crocheted hexie blanket, and she ran out of scraps. So she put out a call on Instagram and said, hey, has anybody got scraps for me? And I said, sure, of course I've got scraps in all colors. So I sent her just shy of 200 grams of my Patton's Classic wool, and I got 8 different colors for her. Sent those away, and she returned to me with these. And I did ask for it. She did know that I was looking for it. She had knit her son Sebastian a pair of socks with it, and so I only needed 1, and I asked for 1. Do you happen to have enough to help me get a pair of socks out of my 150-gram ball? And she responded with 2 and her scraps from Sebastian's socks, which I thought was beyond generous. So I was tickled pink because I would really love to make a big, tall pair of socks with these. And then I was also happy because I see so many people making their sock scrap blankets, and I love them. It's just I've never been a sock knitter, so I don't have any sock scraps laying around. And actually, even though this is in the remnants of a self-pull ball, this has jogged my memory. And I told Kate that I would show you how to do my how I made the little center pull balls for her with my worsted scraps, so it would be really easy, because sometimes scraps are tricky to deal with. So I told her I would show you. I will get to that. Don't let me forget. I will get to that at the end of the podcast. So I thought that was very generous of her. I'm going to make a tall pair of socks and then start on my sock wool scrap collection for a sock wool blankie. Last yarn acquisition to chat about is this super pretty purple mystery yarn. I know it's wool. I know it was purchased from a very high-end yarn shop by my mother-in-law. She made a beautiful cape out of it, and this is what's left over. I did a wraps per inch test, and it came out to worsted weight, even though it's a thick and thin. You can see here, thin, thick, thin, thick. It came out to worsted weight, and I weighed it up, and it's 43 grams. So I don't know off the top of my head what 43 grams of worsted weight works out to in approximate yardage, but if you can think of a pattern that can use probably just about 100 yards, maybe 115 yards of if I'm lucky, of this beautiful purple yarn with reds and aquas and blues in it, let me know. I was thinking about a headband, like a cable knit headband maybe, but I don't know. And I certainly don't want to do a project and then have another leftover ball of mystery wool that I have to worry about. So let me know if there's something that pops to the front of your mind with that, and I can get that knit into something lovely. Okay, now we've come to the part in the podcast where I will demo for you the wonders of a PVC pipe. Kate asked me to show you guys what I do with my PVC pipe because she really loved when I sent her my worsted scraps that I sent them in these little center pull, yummy, scrummy little balls. I don't have a ball winder, and that's how this came about. And I prefer to keep my scraps nice and tidy. I have this old general store drawer that came from my grandma's house, and I keep my little balls yummy and wound up in here so that they are out of the way. But if it's a yarn that I particularly like, if it's a yarn that I don't really care about, you know, it's just orange worsted weight, it goes back into the stash downstairs. But if it's a yarn that I really like to look at, I keep it here in my pretty drawer, and then wind it up in the ball, and it's just there and pretty, and I look at it on my bookcase. So anyhow, it is just a PVC pipe. It's just a PVC pipe with this little notch. I believe that this is 1.5 inch in diameter, and it's just a piece of scrap. I got the idea off of Pinterest, and someone was using a toilet paper roll to make their center pull ball, and I did it once. It worked like a dream, and then I threw the toilet paper roll away. And I said to my husband, why on earth did I do that? I have to wait for us to get through another roll of toilet paper. He says, no, I'll handle it. So he goes downstairs to the garage and produces this. And let me show you how it works. The only tricky thing to this whole ordeal is getting the slip knot right. So I just do the first finger slip knot. What I call the first finger slip knot. Who knows what you call it? Because if the slip knot is, if the tension of the slip knot is on the working yarn instead of the tail, when you go to wind it, it'll keep pulling out and it won't hold it right, and it'll get wonky and you will be very unhappy. So just do your regular slip knot, holding the tail in your hand. Wind it twice, and then pull the inside yarn over the outside, and then pull that again. So wind it twice, inside over, and then outside over. And then you've got the tension on your working yarn, so that when you slip the knot in the groove, it stays there and doesn't come out. Then you just put your thumb. I go down according to how much yarn I actually have to wind. If it's just a scrap, I do it up here because it's easier to manipulate the tube. But if you have a lot of yarn, or if you're doing a whole hank, you'll want to start closer to the middle. So you just go down and you hold it with your thumb. Then to get the most tension on the ball so it stays together instead of flopping apart, I have this little system, and it's really all you're doing with this is fabricating the same system in your hand as a cake winder, cake ball winder. So anyhow, whoa, you hold it with your thumb. I just heard a car door. I hope I don't have a workman coming. I shouldn't have a workman coming. Maybe that was the neighbor. And you go up on the side that's closest to your hand and down on the side that's furthest from you. And that gives you a really good swirly start there. So then the trick, if there is a trick beyond the knot, once you've got it anchored, you can let go of it with your thumb, and then you keep going to the top on the one side and the bottom on the other side, and then just slowly turn it as you go, just like you were making a ball of yarn, just a plain ball. So you just turn it. Look at those colors, that teal. Turn it and wind it, and turn it and wind it, and turn it and wind it. And every now and again, if my ball is little, I don't worry about it, but if my ball is big, every now and again it will start to creep up the side there, and so I just pinch it down. And it keeps itself tidy, and it keeps itself nice, and the finished product is lovely to work with, and this is a great little thing to do with all of your scraps while you're watching knitting podcasts. Or rugby. Works really well with rugby too. Oh yeah, honey, I saw that. That was a great point that he scored. So anyhow, that's how you do the PVC ball winding trick. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about before I go into books and wrap this thing up is the other things that I'm doing that are not knitting related, because I do a lot of things that are not knitting. A gal on Instagram, I'll find all of her information. I don't have it off the top of my head, but just this morning, I don't have it handy on my phone. Just this morning she posted, and she did hashtag multi-craftural. And so instead of multicultural, she has invented this little thing. I guess she's invented it. I've never heard of it before. That says that multi-crafturals are welcome on her little craft along. She's doing a D-stash. And I really love the term, because I feel like so much in my knitting, not so in the knitting crowd, I feel like knitters are nicer. But in the quilting crowd, quilters can be very snobby and very I guess they take it personally. They can be very defensive if you decide to spend some time knitting instead of quilting. And even, you know, people get snobby about it. Well, I don't crochet. I've graduated to knitting. Well, I only crochet. It's the only way to do things. I think they're prettier that way. Or I quilt, or I scrapbook, or I paint, or whatever. I don't understand why people who make things put themselves in silos. So I loved this word that she used, this multi-craftural, and I'm going to be using it. So I wanted to share with you two sewing projects that I've got going. One is I have graduated to a proper teapot using tea brewing experience some days. I prefer tea bags on the days that I just need to shoot some caffeine in my body and I don't have time to think about it. But if I have time for the teapot experience, I do it and I'm enjoying it. I have a boatload of loose leaf tea. Most of the time I make my own tea bag using tea brew bags and then just use it just like a tea bag, and I make one mug. But anyhow, I'm working on becoming a teapot girl, but I don't have a teapot cozy. And I know that there are a boatload of patterns to knit teapot cozies, but I have these two fat quarters that I absolutely adore, and I want to make a quilted tea cozy for my yellow teapot. I have a yellow teapot that's kind of this color yellow, maybe a little bit more vibrant than this. So I got these two fat quarters at the same time, at the same shop with my aunts. We were on a shop hop, quilting shop hop. And I love them. And if there's anything I regret, it's not buying more of this fabric. It is beautiful to me. I love that it has so many colors in it. And I love that it's a big, bold, floral, feminine print. But it's not overwhelmingly girly because the background is navy blue. So it would make a very good soft goods, very good home product. And I think it doesn't have a ton of yellow in it, but it pairs beautifully with the yellow. So I'm going to work on a tea cozy, quilted tea cozy. I don't have a pattern. I'm probably just going to wing it or improvise something that I find online. But because I love both of these fabrics so much, I want to figure out a way to make it reversible. So some days when I'm feeling a little more whimsical, I can get this, I can use this really lovely kind of, I don't know, print, kind of glockenspiel type, you know, cuckoo clock print. And on days that I'm feeling a little more Downton Abbey, use my bold floral. So that might be coming down the pike if I can muster up the courage to cut either one of these beloved fabrics. And then lastly, I really want to do some soft goods for my outdoor areas, my porch and my deck. And I don't like that when you go to the Lowe's or you go to wherever, Home Depot, the places that sell patio cushions, patio pillows, I don't like that they just look all the same. They either look tropical, which is not what I'm going for, or they're striped. And I don't want someone to come to my house and look at my beautiful antique church pews on the front porch and say, ah, Lowe's pillow. So I'm going to try to get some soft goods in my outdoor spaces and make them with indoor fabrics and try to research and experiment with some different products to make them waterproof and to give them a little bit of a UV coating. So I have this mini dwell quilt pattern. It's 13 by 15 mini quilt, and I would love to do it and hang it up in place of a wreath on my front door or right by my front door. It's 9 little houses. And if you don't already know this about me, because I don't share much of my quilting, I have a weird obsession with houses made of fabric. Can't quite put my finger on it. Pillows, I make house pillows. There's a house tea cozy pattern. I just lost my sunshine. It's going to look weird in the camera. But I just love this little house block, and I think how perfect would it be to put it out there and use it to welcome someone to my home. And my old quilt shop sold scraps by the pound, which I really loved because she would put them in bags and they would all match one another, coordinate with one another automatically. Most of these are in the Daydream collection by Kate Spain. There might be 1 or 2 of them that are not. Look at that. Wouldn't that make a cheerful tea cozy? So yeah, I bought all of these in a scrap bag, and she just charges per pound, which I love because this one is in the Sunnyside collection. Because I love scrappy things, but I don't want to buy a boatload of fabric just to get something that looks scrappy. It defeats the purpose of quilting to me, because quilting, according to our heritage, is doing the best you can with what you've got. So why on earth would I go and spend $90 on something just so I can chop it into little bits and sew it back together? I don't know. So anyhow, stay tuned for a look at some of these on Instagram and future podcasts. All right, so I'm coming to the bottom of my cup of tea. I have blathered on about all sorts of things. Let's wrap this up by talking about books. Okay, I don't have a ton to say about books this week, except that we finished the Poisonwood Bible read-along, and I will link to those discussions. I still need to get the last discussion post up, but I will link to those discussions in the blog. It was a really intense book for me, and I think for a lot of people, and I just was so surprised at how much I learned about African history and, you know, in the specific, the Democratic Republic of the Congo history, things that I had no idea what was going on. And even, it's amazing to me when you look at the news every night and you don't really know the background to some of these countries' years and decades and centuries of turmoil. And, you know, you look at the news and you think, why is life falling apart in the Sudan? Why is life falling apart in Congo? Why is life falling apart, you know, in the Middle East? And then you learn more about what has happened there over the past 100 years, 200 years, since, I guess, the Congo has been plundered by white civilizations since the 1500s. So learning about that through reading the Poisonwood Bible was incredible to me. It's not a happy book. It's not a cheerful book. But if you want a deep book and you haven't read it, Barbara Kingsolver's writing is always fabulous, and I certainly recommend it. If not because it's a lovely book, because, so you could say, yes, I've read that and I understand that. It's a good book to read to broaden your horizons. I put an audiobook, I put The Nightingale on audio on my phone with high hopes of getting it read while the house was under construction, and then I found that it was just too much. It was overstimulating to me to have the audiobook going in my headphones and then also try to be engaged in what was going on in the bathrooms and then have to listen to all of the nail banging and clanging and sawing and stuff. So I didn't get anywhere on audiobooks during this past month of construction. Right now, and so there's such a long list of people who want The Nightingale at the library that I had my turn and lost it, so I'm going to have to wait for my next turn to come up again. So that is on the back burner right now. Right now I am listening to a book called The Blackbird House on audio, and I'm really enjoying it. I can't exactly tell you why. It's set in Massachusetts, in colonial America. It is set in colonial times. Actually, it's before the American Revolution, and it's at the point where things are starting to get hairy between colonists and colonials at the time. It has an undercurrent of the Salem witch story. Witch is witchcraft. If you have red shoes, you're a witch, and it has some very strong female characters in it. I've only gotten through chapter 4 or chapter 5 at this point, so very beginning of the book, but I'm definitely compelled to keep reading. It's got very strong characters, female characters. One thing that's throwing me off a little bit in the book is how fast the book moves. From one chapter to the next chapter, you've got a couple who barely know one another, and then the next chapter is narrated by their 11-year-old daughter. So you just kind of have to hang on for the ride there. But I think it's going to be good, and I look forward to telling you more about it in subsequent podcasts. I think that's it for me and books, and that's it for me in the podcast. So I hope that I get to edit the video so that everything runs smoothly. I haven't had the camera die on me. I haven't had the sun go down. I haven't had a workman walk in. So I'm kind of wondering if I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop on the podcast getting done this week. But I hope that the format goes well, and I hope that you enjoy being caught up on other things that are going on here, and I hope to stay in touch with you in the meantime through Instagram and the blog and Ravelry. So feel free, if you have any questions, to comment or reach out to me, send me a message, and let me know what's going on. Let me know what you're making. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.